All right. Hello, everyone. Here is GGian, and this is our Fireside Chat with Artists. In this show, we talk about everything and anything art and crypto with designers and creators alike in the NFT space, otherwise known as non fungible tokens. My guest today is legendary. He is an Austrian artist exploring abstract looping 3D art, encapsulating self reflection as the central leitmotif. So, hello, Legendary. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excellent. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. I'm very, very happy to have this opportunity to interview you.
And I'm happy to be on stream. It's actually my first interview as a crypto artist that I'm doing.
Yeah, a fun fact about that is that usually before interviewing, we go and hear other people's interview with the person to get some ideas. So I have a bit of a hard time with you, but I think I like your art so much that it made it easier in another sense. So that's great.
That's good. That's good to know. Yeah, actually, you've also collected the piece of mind that is on screen right now.
Yeah, very very biased here. I have to admit. Uh, this piece is one that I have collected. Everyone's called Panther Ray, and it's one of the first few 3D animation that you were doing, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
all right. So one thing I'm very curious because your artwork is kind of different than most that we encounter in the space. And I wonder if that comes down to background. What did you used to do before getting into crypto art?
So I don't have any professional training in art. My background actually is in business and economics. Went to grad school in both Austria and in Austin, Texas. But besides working in consulting and investment banking, which was not always that satisfying for me because all I was working on basically were spreadsheets, reports, etc. I wanted actually to create something and to share something for others to enjoy. And I was always enjoying art, but I wasn't creating up to that point, right? And my best
Right.
friend actually introduced me to digital photography, and I got myself a DSLR right before I moved to the States for grad school. And I got into most of nature, landscape, cityscape photography. Also spent a lot of time on Instagram following other photographers and finding out what kind of work they do and how they work the subject, because like one of the big differences, right, when you look into at 3D art and photography is that in photography you have to work with basically what's given. You have to wait for the perfect lighting conditions,
Mhm.
you have to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect weather you want to have in your scene, and there's not so much you can edit because like in photography there's also big controversy going on with people saying you're not allowed to over edit your pictures, like changing skies or blending multiple images together, because
Mhm.
it's not actually representing what the picture that you did take. But I never like to follow that logic. So obviously, I also got more inspired by photographers and artists who had a more surrealistic style, like Elia Locardi. He's big into what he calls blending moments in times. So he basically, takes pictures starting from sunrise to sunset, and going through the entire night, and then blends them into a single surrealistic moment that you cannot actually view or perceive in that way because it does not exist. And I always like to do that myself too, and to push the boundaries of photography. And at some point, I also started, to add hand drawn elements into it, or to shift pictures a bit, so that you could not really tell if it's a photography or if it's like digitally created and then mix different elements. Relative reality, for example, is a picture of the Oculus station in New York City. And what I try to do here is like to distort the geometry a bit and to change some pieces of the structure in the background, so that if you know the Oculus Station, if you've seen it, you know that something's off with the picture, that something does not feel right. But if you maybe never seen it before, you would have to look a couple of more times to see that there are like some distortions and some cuts, especially in the right side of the image and also on the left side, that don't make sense, and
Yes.
that show that something's going on there. And so it's like it's literally designed to make you think about the picture. And at first you see, oh, it's just a photography, but then make you think, no, there's something more going on, and that then there's something different in this picture. So yeah, not really background in art, but in photography. And it was actually crypto art that got me more into the 3D work and the crypto space per se.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I thought actually for long about this space because not knowing this space, I was like, I want to figure out what's off, what has been done here. So it couldn't, perhaps it could be just a picture, but yeah,
It's
that's
also
great.
the only work that I minted that is based on a original photography of mine.
Hmm.
I was thinking to do more photographic work and to really mix it up with more of my recent 3D work, and to like create something that I have not seen in the space before, because I think it's cool that I can somehow tie together both of my artistic endeavors, so to say, both photography and 3D art.
Hmm. Yeah. So this leads me towards my next question. When you started, you used to do static images, but then your focus became 3D GIFs. How was the shift? How was the process, the transition?
Like I think the reason that I started with static work in 3D art was also that I was used to being a photographer. I was not a videographer. I only did static images, and I was used to work with static scenes, static compositions. Um, and that's why at first, when I familiarized myself with 3D art, I also it felt more natural to me to work with static images. And at first, I also just, in terms of lighting, I just tried to recreate typical lighting scenes that I would explore or wait for in the real world, so to say. Um, but then, something like clicked in my mind, and my thought process around creating art shifted completely, because then I actively like began to realize that when working in 3D art, you're basically not waiting for the perfect moment. You're just creating your own world. You create the lighting, the textures, you set the whole scene, and you do not have to wait for the perfect moment or the optimal moment in terms of light. You can do just anything that you want to
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
And the next logical step for me was, because I'm a storyteller at heart, and a video is more than a picture, to kind of, don't want to overuse the phrase, but to leverage the digital canvas and to tell more of a story uh, by having motion. And this
Yes.
is what first got me like into 3D GIFs. Um, and then I also started to get more into loops, because it basically, if the thought process was right, if you have the video up on the wall, or you look at it on your screen or wherever, as a viewer, you pass the picture, you pass the video at any given moment in the loop, and it should work for you that you like get to the picture in the middle of the video, so to say, look at it, and then it loops seamlessly, and you don't have a cut where it starts all over and you feel like, oh, I started in the middle of the loop or in the middle of the video and I didn't see the whole thing. So a loop for me on a digital canvas just makes perfect sense.
You don't miss anything.
exactly, and it works in terms of storytelling.
All right, that's perfect. I love the answer. So this is a bit more of a technical question, and it's because I see your images take quite a bit of time to load, and the pages get quite a bit laggy. So, what kind of equipment, what kind of computer are you using to create your art? I imagine it must be very demanding.
Oh my god, that was quite of a journey this year, because I think I literally upgraded my hardware like 4 or 5 times, because as a photographer I was used to work in Photoshop, and of course you need decent specs, but it's not too exhausting for or too demanding for the laptop or for the PC in general. And I also like to work on both PC and Mac. So my first intuition was to get a used iMac of a platform that basically would be similar to Craigslist in the USA. And I got the iMac, and for the first static images, it worked well. And
Mhm.
when my scenes started to get more complex in Blender, it just took me ages to render. And everything I rendered, obviously I did render on the cloud, but then it got to the point where even my test renders or still frames would take like forever to render. So I upgraded to another iMac. um, wasn't enough. Sold both of the iMacs at, luckily for me, at almost the same price that I got them for. Upgraded to a gaming laptop, Windows laptop, worked better, but man, this thing was loud, and it was impossible to keep cool if you kept rendering for a couple of hours. So
Uh-huh.
then I just went all in and upgraded on a gaming PC, basically with a GeForce RTX 2070 i9 processor and everything that's, so to say, state of the art. And now it's working perfectly. Now I'm happy with the setup.
That's quite a journey indeed. I'm glad you managed to sell them. Jesus.
Yeah, that was quite something, right? Because it was, man, if I don't manage to sell these and I've upgraded 3 times already, I'm gonna be at a huge loss just trying to find the perfect setup to create my art. Because I would never ever have believed that like 3D rendering is so hardware intensive.
Yeah, it scales very highly, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And especially if you have a scene like in We Should Have Left, which is this city flyover that I did. Like, to build the scene, exactly, to build the scene, I had like 2 or 3 thousand buildings in it. Um, and before I reduced it to that amount, there were like 10 or 12K buildings in the scene, and it did not work out at all. So I had to, cut it down and uh, think think about the camera flight, how to make it work with just 2,000 buildings, and give them the impression that you're really going over a city and zooming into this guy standing on a skyscraper there.
Yeah, and it's the level of detail. It's crazy. It's mind blowing.
And that's also where I can relate to as a photographer, because in Blender there are like so many cool plugins and extensions that you can use. And there's a couple of extensions that change the way you can set up your camera, that it feels more like a camera would be set up in traditional photography, and you really get to play with ISO, aperture, etc. And that made the transition into 3D art for me way easier, because I at least had something familiar I could work with and I could relate to when, setting up the scene and then getting the lighting done and the camera, which is obviously one of the most important things for me, at least, to do.
No, that's a very, very good point. So it kind of, you really leverage your skills on your exploration of this new sort of art, really. Uh, in the sense that what you knew that was photography, was the way you got to learn on how to do 3D, and I never thought that would be a thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Because once you realize that there are no boundaries in the scenes and in the work that you build in 3D art, it's just game changing for me as a photographer. It's opens completely different world because you change your mindset from playing with something existing and creating around something existing to just creating your own world and really trying to transfer the scene or the idea that you have in your mind on the digital canvas. And this was one of the most amazing moments for me this year when I realized that I could do that in 3D art.
That's so special. That's nice. So, how much time do each piece usually takes to be made?
So typically, I start with an idea and with a sketch on paper. Mostly, it's a scene that I envision, and it's mostly a static scene that I or two scenes that I see in my head. It's like the beginning point and the ending point, and I'm thinking of how I could get there. What other elements do I need in the scene to tell the story? And then I have a little, basically a storyboard that I have sketched out on with pen and paper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I just try to build the scene in Blender. And that's also the point when building the scene. It comes to me quite naturally what kind of materials I want to use, what kind of textures I want to use to just help me convey the message that I wanna that I wanna transfer to this work. And most of the time, really, then I spend on the final details to get the loops done, to play around with the light, play with the camera, because lighting, camera, and perspective, they entirely change how an image or how a video feels for me.
Mm-hmm.
And ping is one of the examples where I uh, changed away, so to say, from the perfect seamless loop, because there's, if you notice at the very last frame, there's this little distortion where the sphere jumps a bit, because I wanted as like to really simulate a ping, and there's always a bit of a delay, and I wanted to kind of encapsulate that in this loop and to break with the concept of seamless loop. So it still loops, but there's a bit a part that gets you thinking,
Yes.
why is this out of order? What's not working here? Is Did he miss something, or is
Uh-huh.
it on purpose? And what's the story behind it?
No, yeah, you brought a very interesting point. Is that although we only experience the end result, as you're working with those pieces in 3D, you experience them in many different ways, right? Not only the end result.
Absolutely, and sometimes the end result completely changes from what I wanted to build initially, because sometimes you just shift the camera perspective and you you figure out that the story that opens up by changing the camera is completely different, and then you have to adjust the lighting, the materials, add or remove other objects. There's also, like with one of the other artworks that I did with these cubes and the spheres, um, that basically works in any orientation. It's not orbital transparency, it's just thinking of the name. Yeah, it's this a question of perspective, actually. Yeah. Um, so when I built it first, I just wanted to have like one sphere moving inside the cube that rotates, similar to the way it is in Pink. But then I shifted the camera and I found out that basically the same artwork tells a completely different story if you just shift the camera by 90 degrees. And then I wanted to build it perfectly symmetrical, add the second sphere into it. So if you look at this picture on your smartphone, basically, and you change the orientation to from landscape to portrait, it conveys a completely different feeling, but it's still the same artwork. And that's
Oh,
so cool because, like, if you put it on the wall or something, or you put it on a screen, you can rotate it and flip it just how you
wow.
like
Uh-huh.
the loop most, and everyone basically can look at it differently, and it still works, and it's still the same video in essence, but it conveys more stories in one. And that's something that I realized when creating it. It was not the initial idea to do it like that.
That's so interesting. So, do you, on that note, do you struggle to call a piece finished?
Sorry, do I struggle to?
To say that it's done
Oh
and it's
yes.
the end
Oh,
result?
oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's that's something very difficult for me to say. That's the point where I say it's done, because, like, if you get to a point where you think it's done, and then you have another idea that strikes you, and you start to play around with another concept, you're basically then building a completely different artwork, which is okay because you can, follow the flow
Mhm.
and build something completely different, which I did with a question of perspective. But at some point you have to say it's finished. Or if you really enjoy a concept, like I did with the pendulums, um, it was really when I noticed that one artwork is not enough to explore all the variations and things that I had in mind for the pendulums. Because when I built the first pendulum, I was thinking about reflections, and I tried to incorporate them in the Egyptian equilibrium. But I realized that's way too much for one piece. And then I realized I want to have something with reflections ongoing, and this is where I decided to make it a three-piece series, with the last part being the transparency of time that you just showed. And when I started working on the reflections, I also had the concept: why can't there be like another pendulum inside the pendulum and another pendulum inside the pendulum? Because if you make them all out of glass, there have to be amazing reflections inside. Um,
Yes.
and this is where I realized I need to break it up, because you cannot possibly put that all into a single artwork. And I decided to make a series out of it. So this is
Hmm.
sometimes what helps me to put put an end to an artwork, when I can tell myself that if I have additional ideas, I still can work on something similar.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point, and I think on this piece in specific, it brings it gives me this feeling that like I'm exploring a visual of some sort of a concept that I had never thought about. And you just mentioned it. Why can't you have a pendulum inside of a pendulum? And this is, I'm glad you split it up.
This is also something that got me like away from static images into animated work, because, like, I love reflections. I love them in photography too, especially with cityscapes, with nightscapes,
Mhm.
um, built around the sea, a river, or basically any body of water. And reflections really get interesting when there's movement, and that's something you can obviously do with 3D art. When you build your loop and you use glass and you use interesting lighting, you get so many reflections. And that this is really where I get lost in detail and in building. Is just when I use glass, I can spend hours on playing and tweaking with the lighting, with the colors that I use to get something that that really helps telling the story of the work.
So, on average, specifically, how much time, how many hours would you say on average?
Oh, that's so difficult to say. Um, like, suppose I have the idea, and
Huh?
which is always the difficult part, and I have my sketch ready. And there's also the question, do I have all the skills? Because I'm relatively new to 3D art, right? And I watch a lot of tutorials and everything to, get the skills and the skill set that I need
Mhm.
to actually be able to build the world that I envisioned. And then it's really mostly a question of days when I get it to a point where I can, like, share it with someone and say, hey, that's a process so far. And then really sometimes it happens that I'm quite happy with the first attempt in terms of lighting, materials, textures, etc. Then it's almost done at that point, but sometimes it takes me a couple of days, if not weeks more, to get to the point where I say it's done.
Wow.
And it's not a straight process. I have
Mhm.
so many artworks and concepts that I started that I never got to a point where I say, yeah, I'm satisfied with that, right? And I just keep revisiting them after a couple of weeks, or some even after 1 or 2 months, to see if I have a new idea how I could work on them, or just take out some elements and incorporate them into into something new, or just merge two concepts to something new.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. Don't give me specific hours. You don't know yet. How do you approach the market or advertising?
Well, I think that's a bit different for me than for many other artists that I talk to in the space, because, as I said, I have a background in business and economics, and actually my day job before that was in marketing. Used to work a couple of years in marketing, so I I am a marketer at heart, and I really like or enjoy to share my work and to talk about it. And also, I realized that you just need to build a following on social media, being it Instagram, Twitter, stream it on Twitch, or get out there and share what you do with the world, to get to just get the opportunity to uh, get people to see your work, and
Mhm.
in the best case, always enjoy it. Um, and so for me, when I got into crypto art, I used to be on Instagram as a photographer. I still have two Instagram channels, one that I still post my photography on, and the other that I tried to change to my 3D art. It's a channel that had 9K, 10K followers on it. And like the shift from traditional photography to 3D art was something very difficult to do, and I'm still not at the engagement that I used to have initially, even though I deleted all my content and basically set up everything brand new. But like, I was into crypto before I was into crypto art, so I was on Twitter, but I didn't have like a single follower because I just kept lurking, stalking, and reading on
Uh-huh.
whatever got me interested.
Yes.
And then I actually realized that there's like a big, obviously, NFT art, crypto art scene on Twitter, and it's quite a cool medium to share your work. And I, yeah, just love being on Twitter. And because like I got into the crypto world. mm, I don't know what year it was when ETH was back at $10, $11. Has to be a
Oh,
couple of years ago, right? And
but I missed.
well, at this point, I didn't know about ETH, but I knew about Bitcoin, right? And back at that time, I already was FOMOing into being too late for investing into crypto. I had no idea about Bitcoin, Twitter, or any other cryptocurrencies whatsoever, what they exactly did or what their purpose was. My single thinking basically was, I'm too late for Bitcoin. There has to be something else similar to this magical internet money. Then I found ETH, invested a bit, as I said, at around $10, $11. I
Mhm.
did not have that much of a clue what a wallet is, how it all works. And of course, it had to happen, right? I lost my seed phrase,
Yes.
and I tried to recover it over the years. And this is also, it wasn't, at that time, it was a big investment for me. And of course, it would be nice to have, it would be amazing to have access to this wallet. But somehow, it also kept me interested to see what's going on with the ETH price, what's going on in the crypto art world, in the crypto world, sorry. Because I had this natural interest to somehow recover my seed phrase and gain access to my wallet. And this is when I started to learn about the crypto world per se, and to learn about different currencies, what the purpose is, what the ecosystem is. And then it still took me another couple of years to get into the NFT space. Like for me, it started with Gods Unchained,
Yes.
and at the time I was playing Blizzard's Hearthstone,
Hmm.
and I was big into the concept of the card game by Blizzard. And then I was like, hey, there's something called Gods Unchained, which is feels similar to it, but it's built on the blockchain, and I like the combination of those two things. And this is what got me into exploring the concept of NFTs. And then it took me a bit more time to find out that there's also NFT art. And then I was like, for me, it was in June or July when I minted my first work. It was a photography um, that I did before, but I digitally manipulated to make it look like it was painted, and also made like a video out of it, of how it was created on the canvas. And then the whole process I was talking about before started, of changing to static 3D art, and then doing the animations, and then getting to the loops.
Yes. Uh, it's interesting because I think I had a similar story. I was on Bitcoin first, and then I learned about Gods Unchained, and with Gods Unchained, I learned about NFTs. So I relate to some parts of it.
Yeah, blockchain gaming was huge for me. Also, not only Gods Unchained, but later also Axie Infinity.
Hmm.
And then I started, to read and find out about many more projects that are on the blockchain, and it was really amazing for me to see how many decentralized applications and projects there are.
Yes. So this one is fine if you say no, but it's better if you say yes. There's any sneak peeks of projects that you're working currently that you can show us?
Um, so there's actually, I got an Oculus Quest a couple of weeks ago, or it's been a month ago, I think. And I started to experiment a bit with Tilt Brush, being Google's VR art tool, and
Hmm.
getting into VR art. So it's something that I'm currently exploring, and that I want to do a series around next year. But it's quite difficult to share VR content for me right now.
No, no worries, no worries. It's enough. The tease you made is already enough. It's something different.
Because as I said, right, the ability to build your own world in 3D art is amazing. And for me, it gets even more amazing if you can be a part of it, and have a more immersive experience. And doing this with virtual reality is something that I'm really, really keen about sharing next year.
Perfect. Can't wait for it.
This is also why I got myself a Somnium space parcel with a friend of mine, with Ulissa Art, and we want to build it over the holidays, set up our gallery there so that we at least have a VR gallery there before we have our VR art pieces ready to share and show.
All right, that must be fun.
It is. It is. You can spend so much time in VR. It's incredible.
All right, moving on. I want to know, who is the artist that you most admire in this space?
There are a couple of artists. Like one of them for me would be Arc4G with the incredibly satisfying 3D loops that Arc4G works on. They're so playful and so delightfully positive to watch, and I really get lost in them. And I think I discovered Arc4G's work on Instagram, and at that point, I did not know that he also is in the NFT space, and found out about it way later when I saw work on either Super Rare or Maker's Place. In terms of work ethics, people, I'd say, like, people spend the last 13 years working on dailies and sharing his 3D art on Instagram with his followers. And in an interview, he also was asked, like, if he was, producing content for days where he's not so motivated to create a daily. But he said he didn't, because it would, neglect the whole purpose of creating dailies. So in terms of work ethics, really, to spend more than a decade to share dailies and not skip a single day throughout it is something really amazing. And another artist who's inspiring for me would be Jose Delbo, because I know age is just a number, right? But like, at his age, getting into crypto art and exploring a completely new medium and collaborating with artists in this new world is just incredible. Like, when I get to that age and I have no idea what kind of technology will be on vogue at that time, I hope that I'll have a similar open-minded mindset when it comes to exploring new things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure, those are some great names. If you could collaborate with any artist, who would it be?
There are two thoughts. Like, obviously, someone who works with something that's similar to my style, or basically works with abstract 3D loops. Like, as I mentioned before, Arc4G would be amazing to work with together, just to get an opportunity to explore Arc4G's workflow and how they approach their concepts, etc. But also, it would be quite intriguing to work with someone who has a completely different style, like Primal Cipher, for example, who is also into like comic art, which is mostly 2D in his case. And for me, like, having my background in photography and also having tried to blend both photography and 3D art, I'm really fascinated by the idea of blending completely different art styles and techniques together.
For sure. I hope they're listening.
And there's also someone else who I really would love to work with, and I had the opportunity to talk to her, and we're working on a collaboration that we hope to release sometime in the first quarter of the next year. But I'm not gonna say who it is right now.
Okay.
Not to spoil the surprise.
All right, that's good. So, on the subject of your vision towards your artwork, what sort of
Mhm.
reaction are you trying to evoke?
Like in general with my art, or did you say with the VR art I'm currently working on?
No, in general.
Like first, I really tried um, to create an artwork that in inspires you or somehow gets you to get lost in the art, and to view it for more than just a single loop, and to really give it time to explore it in all details and every motion, and to get you or to get the viewer into a state of thinking, like thinking about the art, thinking about what's going on, because like a big thing for me really is thinking, or the amazing ability of humans of self cognition, and like that point in history when we changed from just a random bunch of molecules to molecules which started to think about themselves, and like this process of cognition is a big one for me.
Hmm.
But also, being an economist, Peter Schumpeter, or Schumpeter, how we call him in German, and his process of like creative destruction, in terms of if you want to innovate, you have to destroy something existing first, and this is also like a loop for me, because like you're always going to be new innovation. There's always going to be an existing status quo that's going to be destroyed in some way to make space for new things coming. So both those aspects, like self cognition and the creative destruction, are big um, big motives in my work, and also the kind of reaction that I like to try to evoke to get um, the viewer to think about it a bit.
Hmm. That's perfect. That's a powerful thing.
And of course, there's also just loops that tell a nice story, but are just created with the intention to enjoy them.
Yes, yes, I can tell. I can tell because it's quite pleasant to stare at them. And I was talking to a friend the other day, like how I always come back and look again, and like thinking, did I saw the thing that I thought that I saw? Can I find it again? So there is a playful feeling with your artwork that it quite impresses me.
And also, like what I was referring to, the creative destruction, it's not always like destroying in terms of shattering something, like I also did in a work of mine, but also like looking at the danse macabre, when you play with the concept of order, disorder, in terms of entropy, when the skulls start to shift, and they just look randomly displaced all over the place, but they're following a quite strict logic, and then they get back into the initial state where
Mhm.
they started. And this is also like for me a process of an innovation loop of some kind.
This piece is mind blowing.
It was also the first collab that I did on Maker's Place with Madolf. He did the design of the skulls,
Hmm.
and because I could never design something as complex and beautifully modeled in detail as he did with the skulls, and I played around with the concept of the motion and the lighting of the artwork of Danse Macabre.
Very interesting. A similar question. What's the symbolism that you most allude to in your pieces?
Well, in this case, it has to be the Baroque motif of Memento Mori. Like, remember that like one day you're gonna die, and all it's everything's over. But also, it's not the end, because the the loop starts again and there's something new. So it's a bit this abstract concept of of infinity somehow, that everything loops and there's not really a beginning or an end to things. And we also don't know at what stage we are as humans, right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. I love how you tied the concept with the medium. I like the gifs, the repetition. It ties with the concept. That's perfect.
And I was also so happy with working on this particular artwork that I upgraded my PC, as I mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
because this one consists of a couple of thousand frames that we had to render, and it would have been an impossible job. And it's also like in Blender, there are multiple, obviously multiple render engines that you use. And most of my work is done in Cycles because Cycles offers the ability to produce more complex lighting, textures, and reflections. And this was my only work, if I recall correctly, that I did not render in Cycles, but in Eevee, which is a more like way faster. It's extremely fast to render things in Eevee. And like, because you asked me like how much time I spend on an individual piece,
Mm-hmm.
when I thought that I was done with this one, and I realized that it took me more than an hour to render a single frame of it, um, I was like, nah, I just have to change the render engine, the render settings.
Yeah.
Started to rebuild everything that it works with the other render engine, with Eevee in that case, and get it to a point where an individual frame was rendered in a couple of seconds. Because even if you do cloud rendering and you have something that takes you, I don't know, a week or two to render in server time, so to say, just would have been unaffordable for me to produce that work.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I suppose when you rendering something that demanding, you cannot do anything else.
Yeah, and if you cloud render, basically you pay per minute that's rendered. And the cool thing is that you can group frames and have them being rendered on a couple of servers at the same time, so
Mm-hmm.
parallel to each other, and so you get it way faster than if you would have just rendered it on a single PC. But still, you get billed for the total time that all the render rigs spend together to work on your final video and a final loop.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, with this one, I knew I had to find a way to get it to a point where a frame is rendered in, I don't know, I think it was 10 or 12 seconds.
Yeah, and it must have taken so much time still.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right. So moving on to the final defined question, I want to know where do you see where do you see yourself in 5 years? How do you want this space to look like?
That's a big question. So in 5 years from now, like, I've been talking to so many people over the last couple of months about crypto art and the crypto space in general, and also like to artists from the quote unquote old art world,
Mhm.
and try to tell them what I do in crypto and why I chose to do digital art that's tokenized on the Ethereum blockchain. And in 5 years, really would love to look back and say that I worked on onboarding and helping other artists to join the crypto art world on the one hand, maybe running my own platform that facilitates this growth of the crypto art community, but still creating my own work, and maybe having built my own my own VR world where you can add more elements, artworks, games, whatever. So just have, kind of a big project that you can spend a couple of years to work on and improve it and make it bigger and add new features and elements to it. Like have a consistent and permanent VR world that you just keep um, adding and adding to it. Yeah. And in terms of how I want the space to look like, that's a very interesting question because you can tackle it like from so many perspectives.
Yes.
Like for me, being in Austria, regulatory issues are are still a thing when it comes to crypto. There's also like so much red tape when you try to set up a company around the crypto world. Because I'm actually in the process of moving everything that I do in the crypto space into my own company, and we set up our LLC, have everything ready to go, but we cannot find a bank that will accept us as customers because they say, you do something in crypto, or even if they say crypto's fine, then they see, oh, you do something with art, and they say, our risk management says, no, we cannot take you as clients because there's AML regulations, so anti-money laundering, or they just are scared when they hear the word blockchain. So in 5 years, I'd really love to see the crypto world in general, not only crypto art, like having more mass acceptance and being better understood by the general public. That it's not just everything that, yeah, just being better understood by the public. I think that's very important and would also help like with all the regulatory issues and tackling the question like inside the crypto world. I think there's like so many services that are already decentralized, and you can have basically so many more services that can work and can be established on the blockchain. I mean, it's already possible to basically go bankless and just rely on decentralized finance and apps and apps that come with it. And in 5 years, I think the whole ecosystem will be still early, but compared to today, way more mature. And I think also big thing will be like the interoperability between obviously different dApps, but also different blockchains. And if everything starts to flow seamlessly together, this will be a huge thing for mass acceptance because there are so many more entry points into the crypto world then. And I also like the concepts when blockchain gaming and art start to get together, like Blankos, for example, where they have artists design the Blankos, the characters there, and everything just gets closer together. Or also like artists who are starting to explore the decentralized finance world, and the community is like really close knit, and everyone has like a different entry point, right, that got them into crypto.
Yes.
And they start exploring, and then they find out about other avenues and endeavors in the crypto space. And I think it's just beautiful when it all grows together.
For sure. Yes. Impossible to disagree. All right, we have a few audience questions. What styles would you like to explore further?
um, One of the big things is that I would like to get back and do more photography. I haven't done photography like in quite some time. I think more than a year. And I was, as I said before, I was thinking about revisiting old photographies of mine and trying to somehow blend them with 3D work or putting a scene together. But I would really love it to get back into photography and start on working on, so to say, an integrated artwork that um, uses a photograph that I didn't take yet, and then incorporates it into an already existent concept into a 3D world that I'd like to build. So this would be something. I know it sounds quite abstract, right? But it's something that's a bit clearer in my head, and that I'd like to explore next year at least.
No, it sounds like you wanna try and put together the stuff that you exploring. You
Yeah,
want to
absolutely,
explore
and
digital.
oftentimes you could say that it's completely different styles and they don't belong together. But it was also like the same for me in photography when people kept telling me that changing the backgrounds, the sky, bringing together, I don't know, a mountainscape with a cityscape. It's not real. It's not what you saw in the photography. It's not okay to do so. Whatever. Um, so this surrealistic explorations in that case with photography and blending things together that don't make sense at the first point always intrigued me for whatever reason.
Yeah, man. I hope you can pull it off.
I hope so too.
Another question. What's your current favorite art marketplace for your art?
For my own art, it's Maker's Place. Like most of, I started on Rarible, and it's an amazing platform. And there's so many things on there, from gaming to art to DeFi, insurances. But it's also like easy to get lost in the and be overwhelmed with everything that's going on. And Maker's Place is obviously way more curated in terms of art, and it's also inspiring just to go through the feed and see what other artists are doing.
Yes. So, did the last huge Nifty Gateway drops change your view on how to proceed with your art in terms of rarity?
um it's that's a good question. So like the open editions on Nifty Gateway are quite interesting because they allow an artist to or they allow basically collectors to get their hands onto an artist's work that maybe would not be that affordable if it were minted as I don't know, one of one, or a 10 or 20 edition piece. But in terms of my own view and the rarity of my own works, I mostly do one-offs, and for the time being, I really like to keep my edition size very, very small. So I don't see myself doing open editions or anything similar in the near future.
Hmm. Yeah, and with that, I think we're done for today. I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you so very much, Legendary, for the interview with the Whale family. I think everyone enjoyed it quite a bit. I enjoyed it immensely, but you already know how much I like your work, so that doesn't count.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the stream. Really appreciate it.
All right, great. So thank you all for watching as well, and I really hope to see you guys next time. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you, Legendary.
Thank you. Bye.